back to IWA, do you expected the company to be as successful as it was, in your first days?
I'd like to think so. I think just being optimistic, the fact that it was something relatively new and different from what WWC was doing. I mean, WWC, it has its stranglehold, it has its place in Puerto Rico, and it ran a certain way. I would compare, for the wrestling enthusiasts that know, like IWA was kind of, and for obvious reasons, was more WWF, more attitude, more sports entertainment. WWC was like more NWA, more wrestling focused than the lights, the story. Yeah, it was more wrestling focused than entertainment and glitz and glamour. Whereas IWA, it was kind of that more modern kind of parallel approach to WWF, where we had the wrestling, but we were jazzing things up a bit. There was more of the storylines and the lights, and the production was higher and better. So, like, to me, like it was going to work. I mean, and it did, obviously. So
I'll translate that. Le pregunto a Andy si él pensaba en sus primeros días que IWA iba a alcanzar el éxito que tuvo. Él me dice, pues obviamente sí. Pues siempre hay que ser optimista al respecto, pero tú veías a WWC que era más enfocado en NWA, Consejo Mundial de Lucha. En lo que es pure pro wrestling, eso era WWC. Pero tú veías IWA y era más enfocado al estilo WWF, Attitude Era, el show, las luces, la pirotecnia, las promos. Y eso fue una de las claves del éxito de IWA. After multiple years with the company, suddenly Andy Anderson, parted different pathways from the company. Why that happened? Was it your decision? What happened with that?
So it wasn't my decision, but what I was told was just that they wanted to give me a break from IWA. I'd been there from the start. And it was one of those things just like right now, like we don't know what to do with you, and you've just been here so long. So it's like, let's, take a break from Puerto Rico, and then, you can come back and we can freshen things up, which makes sense. I mean, back in the territory days, you were in a territory for 6 months, a year, then you would move to the next territory. So it always kind of keep things fresh. And I was fortunate enough. I always thought of myself as a utility guy, upper mid card, where I could be just as credible. I could work the opening match, but I'd be just as credible in the main event. It didn't matter. I mean, I could go with anybody. I could work any style, whatever. So honestly, for me, it was disappointing because it wasn't any ill intention. But I mean, like, I love Puerto Rico. I loved being there. And for everything I was doing, I still felt, because I mean, I was never in the IWA heavyweight title picture. At the time, I held every other title except the IWA title. So, like, to me, it's like there was still stuff that I thought that could have been done, but that's not my call. So I was fortunate enough, though. Luke was still booking at the time, and he was like, "Hey, look, like, let's get you hooked up, and you can go to England, because there they work." I was Brian Dixon, I think it was called All Star Wrestling, and we were wrestling like 5 nights a week. So I mean, you talk about being a nomad there. Like the 2 nights off that we had, one day was for driving, and one day we were actually like at home. So that was kind of like your day to do laundry and clean up and stuff. Other than that, we were always on the go. So I spent a few months wrestling in England. Of note, there was a big guy, Canadian guy, Brody Steele, awesome guy. There was another Joe Legend, who worked as Nord in IWA, another Canadian. He was there. The most notable guy, who was my roommate during that time, some kid, his name was American Dragon. I don't know whatever happened to him. If he became anything big or not, who knows. I do remember, and I'll tell you this story, and I told CM Punk this story once, and he can, not that I'm buddies with him, but in meeting with him. So American Dragon, Daniel Bryan. I remember walking with him. We were going from where we stayed. We were going to get some food, and he was actually talking about wanting to quit pro wrestling.
Oh,
yeah. He just it wasn't as much fun. He just kind of wasn't into it. I think he wanted to be a teacher, something like that. And I remember man, and I'm not saying this story like I had anything to do with the change. I'm just telling you the story for the sake of that. There was at one point in his career, you know, Daniel Bryan thought about quitting, and this was 2003, 2004. I was like, man, like you're awesome, you're great. Like, there's no way, like you got to keep. And he was wrestling in England. He was doing some stuff in Japan, and like my thing to him was like no way, dude. Like, there's no way you can quit. Like you're gonna make it. You're awesome, and you know, I don't want to say I told you so, but.
I freaking told you so. I'll translate that.
Yeah.
En Puerto Rico llega el punto en donde por lo general los territorios eran 6 meses a un año. Ya eso es lo más que estaba un luchador y después ibas al próximo territorio para mantenerte relevante y fresco. Andy estuvo mucho tiempo en Puerto Rico y llegó el momento en que IWA ya no sabía qué hacer con él. Ya había tenido todos los títulos menos el máximo. El IWA nunca estuvo en ese picture. Andy entendía que se pudo haber llegado a esa fase, se pudo haber hecho muchas cosas, pero no fue su decisión. Entonces Andy sale de IWA y Luke Williams, quien era el booker, le dice, oye, vamos a buscar que llegues a Inglaterra. Andy llega a Inglaterra, hasta varios meses allí, y allá sí eso era nómada, lo último expresión, porque eran 5 días luchando, un día guiando para llegar a tu destino, y en tu destino, pues, un día para hacer laundry, para hacer comida, para hacer tus cosas, poner la casa al día, etc. Habían varias personas luchando, entre ellos Norm de IWA, pero había una persona en particular que él menciona en la historia, y es The American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, quien era su compañero. Él hizo su historia así en Punk. Bryan Danielson en el 2003-2004 ya no quería seguir luchando. Punto. No quería seguir luchando Daniel Bryan, ya decía que eso no era para él, quería ser un maestro en aquel momento, y Andy le dice, pero ¿por qué te vas a quitar? Eres bueno, y tarde o temprano vas a lograrlo. Yo sé que tú vas a lograrlo. No se quitó, y sabemos la historia de éxito que ha tenido Bryan Danielson actualmente, Daniel Bryan. What do you do after, moving from England? That's what you got to Ring of Honor, right?
So Ring of Honor, I'm trying to remember, it was either 2003, 2004. So through Puerto Rico, I had met Kerry Silkin. And so for those of you that now everybody knows, like at one point, Kerry Silkin was the owner of Ring of Honor. When he was coming to Puerto Rico, I think 2000, 2001, it was with him and his cousin, Mike Greenblatt. And Kerry talks about this. I'll do a plug for him. Last Stop Penn Station, his podcast. Awesome, full of stories, not just wrestling, but he talks about Puerto Rico, and he kind of talks about some of the stuff that I'm talking about here. They started up a wrestling magazine called Lucha Libre de Puerto Rico, and it had about three issues. But they regularly came. We became good friends. He became like friends with Luke, with Dutch, with a lot of the guys. It was more WWC. Carlos and those guys were still kind of more like not open to it. IWA was a little bit more, but anyways, so that's how I got to meet Kerry, knew Kerry. Somehow the timing of it, there was an opportunity to do a show. So he's like, hey, like come work a show. Okay, cool. Yeah, sure. I mean, and at this time, Ring of Honor was still in its infancy. It was still 1 or 2 years in. It was still new. So I went, I worked a match. It was New Jersey, I think. New Jersey. Anyways, I worked the match against John Walters. I went over. That was my one match in Ring of Honor. So I always joke I'm undefeated in Ring of Honor. And I can tell you this now in hindsight, like I was short-sighted in this because Kerry's like, well, hey, like, why don't you should kind of stay in this area, like, because he lived in Pennsylvania, so kind of that Pennsylvania, New York area. He's like, if you want to do some shows. At one point, he even suggested like you can help. Like they were looking at opening up like their dojo, their school, and he even said like CM Punk was gonna teach. He said you could kind of work with Punk. At the time, and I'm short-sighted. This is the first time I think I'm actually telling you about this publicly. I said no, and part of me wishes I hadn't have. But I was so focused on.
Wait, you didn't want it to work with Punk.
Oh no! It's not that. It's not that. Here, and I'll tell you why. It has nothing to do with that. What it was because Ring of Honor was running sporadically, and I mean, I'm sure had I stayed there, I could have been working other shows in the area. I was worried about making money, and my main concern was still like WWE in Japan.
Okay.
So, and I think because of the fact that it was still sort of new with Ring of Honor, I didn't, I was like, I'm not sure about this. It didn't feel right. Looking back, I mean, but so that's why I only had one match in Ring of Honor. It's not that it didn't go well. It's not that you know, there was any problems. It was just like, well, I got paid this, which was you know, okay, it was standard, but like, oh man, like how am I going to survive? And talking with Kerry later, he's like, look, like you would have had a place to stay, you know, you would have been fine. I just didn't see that at the time, and that's where I lost out. And you know, in hindsight, having working at a school, working with young guys, obviously would have helped me as much as it would have helped them. But at the time, I didn't see that. I was like, man, like, you know, you're always, guys are always wondering when you had dark matches, when you've had tryout matches, you've had looks, you're always like, well, like, what am, like, it's got to happen. It's got to happen. Like, why not now? What's, you know what I mean? And so there was some frustration, and it just, my judgment was clouded. And unfortunately, that's why my stint with Ring of Honor was short. But the potential was there for it to be more, and just didn't happen.
I'll translate that a cómo Andy Anderson llega a Ring of Honor. Él conoce en aquel momento dado el dueño de Ring of Honor en Puerto Rico. Tenía una revista Lucha Libre de Puerto Rico, que de hecho él tiene un podcast que Andy mencionó acá, que hablan de todo específicamente de historias de Puerto Rico. Pero volviendo a Ring of Honor, él hace una sola lucha en Ring of Honor por decisión suya. Llega a Nueva Jersey, ahí se enfrenta a John Walters, si no me equivoco era el nombre de la persona. Tiene una lucha, gana, éxito, le pagan su dinero, no era una cantidad de dinero exorbitante, era estándar, regular, y es como que, ¿cómo yo voy a sobrevivir con esto? No lo veía en aquel momento dado, y Andy, la realidad es que él tenía dos enfoques, WWF, o en aquel caso WWE ya, y Japón. Ring of Honor estaba empezando, era un proyecto muy nuevo, llevaba 1 o 2 años, y como que no le veía tal vez el potencial que podía tener, y obviamente le estaba más enfocado WWF Japón, WWE Japón, WWE Japón, entre las múltiples cosas que le ofrecieron a Andy fue trabajar un programa con Punk, con CM Punk, y él denegó la oferta no porque tenía algo en contra de CM Punk ni nada, simplemente porque su enfoque era otro. Él quería hacer otras cosas con su carrera, ganar cierta cantidad de dinero, trabajar cierta cantidad de lugares, y por eso pues nunca trabajó más de una lucha con Ring of Honor, pese a que sí tuvo la oportunidad encima de su mesa de estar mucho tiempo. In that, you know, cloudy moment of your career, what was the thing that enlightened you to, you know, to continue? Because you are there, you had the opportunity to work with Ring of Honor, you didn't took it at that point. What happened after that?
So after that, somewhere in there, like I said, the timeline might be a little sketchy, but what ended up happening was I ended up coming back to Puerto Rico for a short spell. Some great stuff, whatever, I think it was like 2 or 3 weekends of shows. Loved it. I was so happy to be back in Puerto Rico. You know, the fans were great, the locker room was great, everything was good. That was in July, I think July 2004. And actually that would make sense, because I think if Ring of Honor was 2004, that would have been like March or April or something. Then that summer I came back to Puerto Rico, did a little bit in Puerto Rico. In August, and this is a crappy story, but this is a life-changing story. In August, I had gone away for a weekend. I was seeing a girl at the time. She actually lived in the States. She came up to visit. And so we went to get away for a weekend, and we went about an hour and a half from Edmonton. There was a water park, and we going down one of the water slides. It's one of the water slides where you can like ride on the tube. Mm-hmm. And whether this makes a difference or not for me, but it says, you know, like people bigger than 200 pounds shouldn't ride on the tubes. And I was whatever I was. Like I would not, I mean, not you know, I was probably
220, 230. You were
not even 230. I was probably like more like in 215 because I
okay.
could kind of carry myself around that and look bigger. So maybe 215. Whether that made a difference or not, I don't know. But anyways, going on the water slide, the girlfriend at the time, she had gone down first. I went down after. I'm taking a turn and it flipped. And when I flipped, I went headfirst into the water slide, and it was a loud thud. And I know I blacked out momentarily. Uh, I got to the bottom, and when I hit the water, I came back to. So for the couple of moments that I was kind of blacked out, you know, whatever. And this is how I know it was a large thud, because as I'm coming out of the water, uh, the girlfriend and one of the lifeguards were standing there, and they're like, it's like, I'm coming out, like, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I just, and I'm a tough guy, whatever. I'm fine. I just, you know, because we heard a big, you know, we heard a loud thud. So, I mean, if you're outside in a water park and you can still hear a loud thud,
Boom.
you know it's loud. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm fine. Meanwhile, like I got like a massive headache already. I'm kind of woozy, but yeah, no, I'm fine. So they go, okay, so whatever, we carry on with our day. My head's a mess. Uh, that was whatever, like a Saturday. I think the Sunday, you know, we drove, came back home that night, went out with some friends, and I was at a bar. We were at a bar, and I remember I had my arm around her, and she's like, we were standing there. She's like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Well, I mean, I'm not okay, but I'm telling." "Oh yeah, no, I'm fine." She says, "Because it really feels like you're putting a lot of weight on me." So I was having trouble standing, but I was like leaning on her. She was shorter than me, so I was leaning on her for support. Um, got back, you know, went back home, and it's like, you know what? So maybe we should just go to the hospital and check things out. And my head, I never felt so much pain in my head before. And so we went to the hospital. They had me there. I was there most of the night. And keep in mind, so this is 2004. You know, head trauma is not a big deal at this. It doesn't have the attention it does now. You know, like the Concussion Legacy Foundation and, you know, all the concussion protocols. There's nothing like that. So I was there overnight. You know, I had the you know, the pain. I had a concussion. At one point, they gave me a needle with a painkiller, and she said she could see my face. My face was like, because I was in so much pain all night, and she said she could just see my face relax, I think, as it was kicking in, because finally all the pain and the pressure was being released. After that, a couple days later, I went and saw my doctor, and he was like, you know what, like, you shouldn't wrestle anymore, because that's just, you know, too much. And so that, in effect, this chapter of Andy Anderson, that's kind of where things ended. So as far as like anything back to Ring of Honor to WWE Japan, that was done. So
Wow. I'll translate that. Due to a water slide. That freaking sucks. Let me.
yes.
Okay. ¿Por qué motivo llega al final la carrera tan exitosa, llena de potencial de Andy Anderson? No fue una lucha. No. Andy, su novia, él va a visitar a su novia, coinciden y deciden ir a un parque acuático. La chorrera decía que no debían montarse personas de más de 200 libras. Andy pesaba 215. No era mucha diferencia. Se tira a su novia primero en la chorrera, cae a la piscina. Andy va, Andy se tira y llega el momento dado en que gira y la cabeza golpea la chorrera. Afuera, o sea, una chorrera cerrada, que se supone que no haga ruido. Afuera ellos escucharon el ruido, escucharon boom, un estruendo, y cae Andy a la piscina como oído, dolor de cabeza. De momento él abre los ojos y ya está afuera con el lifeguard, la novia preguntándole, ¿estás bien? ¿Estás bien? Y como que, sí, estoy bien. Obviamente no estaba bien, pero soy fuerte, sí, estoy bien, soy un luchador. De dolor de cabeza infernal. Esa misma noche está saliendo con la novia, le tiene el brazo echado y él le pregunta, ¿estás bien? Y él, sí, estoy bien. ¿Por qué? Porque me estás haciendo presión. Y él, ok, Andy estaba recostándose encima de la novia para poder caminar o poder mantenerse de pie porque no podía sin él mismo darse cuenta. ¿Qué hay que hacer? Hay que llevarlo al hospital. Andy llega al hospital, le dan unos medicamentos, le inyectan un painkiller por vena y de momento tú ves la cara de él que pone esto y como que empieza a bajar el dolor y empieza a liberar el dolor poco a poco, procede a ir a médicos especializados y su médico le dice, ¿tú sabes qué? No deberías luchar nada más. No puedes luchar nada más. Tienes una conmoción cerebral y ya Japón, México, Puerto Rico, Canadá, Estados Unidos, WWF, ya no más.